I sat in my car in the pouring rain, staring at my phone screen as the venue manager read me the email my mother sent pretending to be me, secretly canceling my $65,000 dream wedding just 3 weeks before the date. My hands shook violently as he asked where to send the mandatory $20,000 cancellation fee bill, completely unaware that my parents had signed the contract guarantee using their own downtown condo as collateral. My parents thought they were destroying my life because they hated my fiancé, but they had just walked straight into a legal trap of their own making. What I did over the next 24 hours didn't just save my wedding, it completely dismantled my parents' financial standing. My name is Hannah. I'm 28 years old, and for the last 6 years, I've worked my way up to becoming a senior project strategist at a corporate logistics firm in downtown Chicago. If my job has taught me anything, it's how to analyze complex systems, read the fine print in high-stakes contracts, and anticipate worst-case scenarios before they happen. But nothing in my professional career could have ever prepared me for the sheer calculated cruelty of my own family. Growing up, my life was dictated by my parents, Richard and Eleanor. To the outside world, they were the picture-perfect old-money elite. My father ran a boutique corporate consulting firm that operated mostly on prestige and private club handshakes, while my mother dedicated her life to the local country club board, charity galas, and maintaining an untouchable social standing. In their world, appearance wasn't just important, it was everything. People were not valued for their character, their kindness, or their integrity. They were judged strictly by their last name, their zip code, and the vehicle parked in their driveway. For as long as I can remember, my parents had my entire life mapped out down to the smallest detail. That included the man I was supposed to marry. For years, my father pushed Brent onto me, the arrogant, silver-spoon stockbroker son of one of his wealthiest club associates. Brent was shallow, condescending, and treated service workers like dirt, but to my father, he was the ultimate prize. Then, 3 years ago, I met Julian. Julian is a pediatric oncology nurse. He spends 12-hour shifts holding the hands of sick children, comforting terrified parents, and working overtime just to build an honest, meaningful life. He comes from a proud, working-class family where people actually care about each other. When I brought Julian home to meet Richard and Eleanor, the tension in the room was suffocating. They didn't care that he was the most compassionate, selfless man I had ever known. All they saw was a man in scrubs who didn't come from money. On the surface, my parents feigned acceptance. They smiled for photos, asked polite questions, and pretended to play the role of supportive parents. But behind closed doors, the mask slipped. They dropped subtle, poisonous remarks about his modest income, made passive-aggressive jokes about his background, and constantly reminded me that I was downgrading my life. I tried to ignore it. I truly believed that if I just kept the peace, stayed patient, and let them see how happy Julian made me, their hearts would eventually soften. I was dead wrong. Planning a wedding is stressful for anyone, but for Julian and me, it was supposed to be the ultimate celebration of everything we had overcome together. From the second we got engaged, we made a strict pact. We were going to pay for this wedding ourselves. We didn't want a single dime of my parents' money hanging over our heads, because I knew from a lifetime of experience that financial support from Richard and Eleanor always came with invisible binding chains. For 18 long months, Julian and I sacrificed everything to build our dream wedding fund. I picked up extra consulting projects on top of my corporate workload, putting away every single performance bonus and commission check. Julian worked grueling night shifts at the Children's Hospital, picking up back-to-back weekend hours until his eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion. Together, we managed to save a total of $65,000. I put in $45,000 from my hard-earned savings, and Julian contributed $20,000 earned through sweat, patience, and sheer willpower. We used that money to secure the Grandview Manor, a breathtaking, historic estate situated on the cliffs overlooking Lake Michigan. It was the kind of venue people booked years in advance, featuring manicured marble gardens, towering glass conservatory ballrooms, and a legendary reputation for hosting once-in-a-lifetime events. It was expensive, but every single penny was ours. We had paid for the catering, the floral design, the orchestra, and the private photography crew straight out of our hard-earned accounts. 6 months before the big day, my parents found out where we were hosting the reception. My mother's eyes practically lit up with opportunistic greed. Suddenly, the wedding wasn't a low-class mistake anymore. It was a high-society event she could use to impress her country club peers. "Hannah, darling," my mother had said over lunch, patting my hand with a false, airy affection, "you simply cannot hold a June Saturday at the Grandview Manor without proper backing. Their high-tier contracts require a Tier 1 financial guarantor to secure the prime weekend slot. Let your father and me put our downtown condo down as the contract guarantor line. Consider it our wedding gift to you. It proves to the venue that our family has real standing." At the time, I hesitated, but the venue manager confirmed that for prime June dates, having a verified property guarantor on file waived the requirement for an immediate cash bond. My parents signed the guarantor paperwork with an arrogant flourish in front of the venue staff, making sure everyone in the room knew they owned a multi-million-dollar property in the heart of Chicago. I thought, for one brief, naive moment, that this was their way of extending an olive branch. I thought they were finally trying to be real parents. What made their hidden resentment so deeply insulting was the fact that I had spent the last 4 years silently keeping my parents' lives from falling apart behind the scenes. They presented an image of endless luxury to their friends, but Richard's consulting firm was a sinking ship. Whenever his clients walked away or my mother's shopping sprees blew past their monthly budget, I was the one who quietly stepped in to clean up the financial disaster. When my father faced a tax audit 2 years ago, I personally handed him $12,000 to clear his high-interest credit card debt so his business line wouldn't be seized. When they wanted to celebrate their 30th anniversary in Paris but didn't have the liquid cash to clear the flight charges, I quietly booked their first-class tickets on my corporate travel points. I managed their private vendor disputes, organized their personal files, and paid off their hidden emergency expenses, all while swallowing their constant, passive-aggressive digs at Julian. Every time my mother snidely asked if Julian's family was going to wear rented suits to the rehearsal dinner, I swallowed my pride. Every time my father made a jab about nurse salaries at the dinner table, I smiled politely and changed the subject. I told myself it was worth taking the high road. I told myself that once Julian and I were standing at that altar, surrounded by the people who truly loved us, my parents would see our strength, accept reality, and finally give us the peace we deserved. I had no idea that while I was keeping their secrets and protecting their reputation, my parents were quietly plotting to destroy the happiest day of my life. 3 weeks before the wedding, everything was supposed to be completely locked in. The centerpieces were chosen, the custom ice sculptures were ordered, and the final floor plan was sent to the caterers. All that remained was a brief phone check-in to confirm the final head counts and finalize the vegetarian meal counts for the reception dinner. It was a cold, rainy Tuesday afternoon. I sat in my parked car outside my office building during lunch, dialing Marcus, the head event coordinator at the Grandview Manor. Marcus had been our main point of contact for over a year, a sharp, impeccably professional man who took immense pride in orchestrating flawless events. "Hi, Marcus," I said bright and cheerfully into the phone, opening my planning binder on my lap. "I'm just calling to confirm the final table arrangements for the garden pavilion, and I wanted to drop off the place cards tomorrow afternoon." There was an immediate, unnatural silence on the other end of the line. The usual background noise of his busy office seemed to vanish. "Hannah?" Marcus's voice came through low, heavy, and completely devoid of its usual warm professionalism. "Hannah, is everything all right? Why are you calling me right now?" My stomach dropped, an instant knot of tension forming in my chest. "What do you mean, Marcus?" "I'm calling to finalize the dinner seating for 3 weeks from now." "Hannah..." Marcus let out a slow, deeply uncomfortable sigh. "I'm looking at your file right now. We received a formal cancellation request from your account at 8 o'clock this morning. The reservation for June 18th has already been removed from our active master calendar." The world seemed to stop spinning. The rain drumming against my windshield sounded like deafening white noise. "What are you talking about?" My voice cracked, rising an octave as cold terror rushed through my veins. "I didn't send you a cancellation. Julian and I didn't cancel anything. We've already paid $65,000. "Hannah, please calm down and let me explain." Marcus said, his tone turning fiercely protective yet incredibly cautious. At 8:14 a.m. today, an email was submitted directly through your client portal using your registered email address and full contract credentials. Attached was a formal letter signed with your full name. "Read it to me," I commanded, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned pure white. "Marcus, read me every single word of that email right now." I heard the clatter of his keyboard before he spoke. It says, "To the management of the Grandview Manor, it is with deep regret that I must formally cancel the upcoming wedding on June 18th. Due to severe personal circumstances and the sudden termination of my relationship with Julian due to infidelity, I can no longer proceed. Please immediately clear the venue date and remove us from your schedule. Signed, Hannah." I couldn't breathe. Air refused to enter my lungs. Infidelity? A broken engagement? It felt like someone had driven a sledgehammer into my chest. Then, the sickening realization washed over me like ice water. The week before, my mother had come over to my apartment under the guise of helping me stamp the physical RSVPs. She had sat at my dining table for 3 hours, drinking coffee while I was in the kitchen preparing lunch. My personal laptop had been open on the kitchen counter, logged directly into my master wedding portal and personal email accounts. Eleanor hadn't just glanced at my screen. She had quietly copied down my contract reference numbers, memorized my security credentials, and learned my personal writing cadence. She had sat in my home, drunk my coffee, smiled at my face, and then gone home to write a vicious, fraudulent letter designed to destroy my relationship and obliterate 18 months of my hard work. "Hannah, are you still there?" Marcus asked softly. "Marcus," I whispered, my voice trembling with uncontrollable rage. "I did not write that email. My fiancé did not cheat on me. My mother wrote that." Marcus took a sharp breath. "Hannah, this is incredibly serious. But there is a massive problem you need to know immediately. Because this cancellation was submitted less than 30 days before the event, our strict venue terms apply. Our policy states that any cancellation under 30 days results in the total forfeiture of the original deposit, plus an immediate mandatory liquidated damages fee of $20,000. He paused, letting the weight of those numbers settle in the air. "And because your parents signed as the exclusive financial guarantors on the master contract using their condo assets," Marcus continued, "that $20,000 penalty is automatically generated as an immediate, non-negotiable charge billed directly to their guarantor line of credit. The system generated the demand notice the second the cancellation email was processed this morning." I sat in the dark interior of my car, listening to the rain, feeling the blood pounding in my ears. They had tried to ruin my life out of pure snobbery and malice. They thought they were going to force me to crawl back to them, broken-hearted, so they could parade me back in front of Brent and their country club friends. I pulled down my visor mirror, looked at my tear-streaked face, and dialed my mother's number. She picked up on the third ring, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Hello, darling. How are the wedding preparations coming along?" "You canceled my venue, Eleanor," I said, my voice dead, flat, and colder than ice. "You logged into my computer, wrote a fake letter about Julian, and canceled my wedding." There was a brief pause on the line, but she didn't panic. She didn't offer an apology. Instead, I heard the light, dismissive clink of a teacup against a saucer. "Oh, Hannah, don't be so dramatic," Eleanor said smoothly, her tone utterly devoid of remorse. "Your father and I saved you from making the biggest mistake of your life. Marrying a hospital worker? Bringing a man like that into our social circle? You were going to embarrass this family beyond repair. You'll thank us in a few months when you're back with Brent." "You ruined my dream, Mom," I said, tears burning my eyes. "You stole $65,000 worth of our hard work." "We did what real parents do," she replied callously. "The venue date is gone, Hannah. It's over. Move back home this weekend, and we'll fix your life." She hung up the phone. I sat in my car in total, suffocating silence after the call disconnected. For 10 minutes, I couldn't move. The rain pounded relentless rhythms against the roof, while my mother's words echoed through my brain. "The venue date is gone, Hannah. It's over." Hot tears streamed down my cheeks. Not just tears of sorrow, but tears of pure, unadulterated grief for the family I wished I had, rather than the monsters who had actually raised me. I replayed every single moment of disrespect Julian and I had endured over the last 3 years. Every snide comment about his night shifts, every time my father purposefully mispronounced his last name, every time my mother smirked when I brought up our savings goals. They truly believed they were gods in my world. They believed that because they gave me life, they had the absolute right to manipulate it, control it, and crush it whenever it didn't align with their inflated egos. They thought I would collapse. They expected me to show up at their doorstep sobbing, defeated, ready to fall back under their thumb and accept whatever prepackaged life they chose for me. And that was the exact moment something inside me snapped. The heat behind my eyes cooled into something sharp and icy. The tears stopped. I reached for a napkin, wiped my face clean, and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I wasn't just a daughter they could push around anymore. I was a senior project manager trained to handle high-stakes corporate sabotage, read complex contracts, and execute strategies under pressure. I opened my planning binder, pulled out the original 40-page master agreement with the Grandview Manor, and began to read every single line of the fine print with extreme precision. My parents had been so blinded by their arrogance when signing the contract 6 months ago that they hadn't bothered to read the legal mechanics of the guarantor clause. They assumed that by putting down their condo as financial backing, they held all the power. But they had overlooked two massive legal realities. First, because they signed as primary guarantors, the automated $20,000 liquidated damages cancellation fee triggered under 30 days was legally, strictly, and irrevocably assigned to their personal assets and credit lines, not mine. Second, under the venue's security and fraud protocols, if an account owner demonstrates that a breach or fraudulent impersonation took place, the original client's liquid payments, $65,000, are not forfeited. Instead, they are immediately held in trust and can be transferred in full to any equivalent date or sister property under the Master Hospitality Group's umbrella without penalty. My mother thought she had used my laptop to destroy my wedding. In reality, she had just handed me the legal authority to trigger a $20,000 direct penalty on her own bank account while keeping my entire $65,000 budget completely intact. I grabbed my phone, called Marcus back, and said 4 simple words. "Marcus, I need an emergency meeting in your office in 30 minutes. Bring the venue's legal team." 30 minutes later, I walked into Marcus's private office at the Grandview Manor. Joining us was David, the lead corporate counsel for the estate's parent hospitality group. I sat down, opened my laptop, and laid down an airtight paper trail. I presented 3 undeniable pieces of evidence. First, I played the recorded phone call where my mother bragged about canceling the event to save me. Second, I showed my home router's IP access logs, proving the portal login at 8:14 a.m. originated directly from my mother's iPad while she was visiting my apartment. Third, I produced security footage from my building's hallway camera showing her entering and leaving my apartment at that exact time frame. David reviewed the digital evidence and closed the file with a heavy click. "This is open and shut criminal fraud and identity impersonation, Hannah," he said flatly. "Your mother breached our digital terms of service and committed contract interference." "I know," I said calmly, "and here is how we are going to handle it." I instructed David to formally log the incident as an unauthorized breach on the master account. Under the venue's safety policies, my $65,000 in personal and joint payments was immediately frozen, protected, and transferred directly to the Waterside Pavilion, a breathtaking, exclusive, oceanfront resort owned by the exact same luxury hotel group, located just 20 miles down the coast. They had an open Saturday date on the exact same June weekend due to a corporate rescheduling. The entire setup, catering, floral design, and orchestra team were transferred seamlessly without losing a single dollar. I instructed Marcus to keep the original cancellation order fully active only against my parents' guarantor profile. Because my mother had formally submitted the request using my stolen credentials and my father was listed as the primary guarantor on file, the system processed the cancellation against their account as valid. The automated system immediately generated a non-negotiable, binding $20,000 liquidated damages fee billed directly to Richard and Eleanor's joint primary bank line. That night, Julian and I set up a private, password-protected guest portal. I called all 150 invited guests individually, our friends, Julian's family, and our extended relatives, explaining the situation in strict confidence. I updated them with the new location at the Waterside Pavilion, sent updated shuttle schedules, and asked them all to keep the location shift completely secret from my parents. Every single guest was horrified by my parents' actions and swore absolute secrecy. For the next 3 weeks, I played the role of the broken, defeated daughter to absolute perfection. When my mother texted to check if I was ready to come home and talk about Brent, I sent back short, hopeless messages. "I'm just staying in bed," or "I can't believe this happened." My parents were so intoxicated by their apparent victory that they never questioned a thing. They spent those 3 weeks gloating to their country club friends about how they had successfully put an end to my unfortunate phase with a nurse. 3 days before the wedding date, the Grandview Manor's accounting department issued a formal, certified demand notice to my father's business address. The notice clearly stated that under the terms of the signed guarantor agreement, the $20,000 cancellation fee was past due and required immediate electronic settlement within 72 hours, or an automatic commercial lien would be attached to their downtown luxury condo asset. My father, assuming the fee was simply the unavoidable fallout of my mother's brilliant plan to stop the wedding, tried to ignore it, believing he could dispute it later through his corporate lawyers. He had no idea that the venue's contract contained a mandatory pre-authorized asset attachment clause that he himself had signed to flex his wealth 6 months earlier. The trap was fully baited, set, and ready to spring. On the morning of June 18th, the weather was absolute perfection. A warm, crisp summer day with clear blue skies over the lake. At 10 o'clock that morning, my parents pulled into the winding cobblestone driveway of the Grandview Manor, dressed in their finest formal attire. My mother wore an expensive designer dress, and my father wore his tailored tuxedo. They were smirking, fully expecting to walk through an empty, quiet estate, satisfied in the cruel belief that they had taught me a lesson and broken my spirit. Instead, the moment they stepped into the marble grand lobby, they were met by Marcus, standing flanked by 2 uniformed county process servers, and David, the corporate legal counsel. My father frowned, adjusting his cuffs. "What is the meaning of this? We are here to inspect the estate grounds following the cancellation." David stepped forward, holding a thick leather folder. "Mr. and Mrs. Vance, you are not here for an inspection. You are being officially served with a final notice of asset execution and contract fraud liability." My mother's face went pale. "What? That's absurd. My daughter canceled this wedding." "No, Eleanor," David replied coldly, opening the folder to reveal the printed IP logs, the recorded phone calls, and the apartment security footage. "You committed identity impersonation to fraudulently cancel a corporate contract. Because you signed as primary guarantors, your pre-authorized financial accounts have been hit with an emergency freeze to secure the mandatory $20,000 cancellation fee, plus $8,000 in accrued legal and processing costs." Before my father could scream or call his lawyer, the process servers handed him the binding court documents. Because he had ignored the 3-day demand notice, the venue's legal team had already filed an immediate emergency lien against their downtown condo's title. Meanwhile, 20 miles down the coast at the Waterside Pavilion, the scene was pure magic. The ocean breeze rustled through white orchids as 140 of our favorite people filled the seats overlooking the water. Julian stood at the end of the aisle in his sharp navy suit, tears in his eyes as the string quartet began to play. I walked down the aisle holding a bouquet of white roses, supported by the immense love of people who truly cared about us. We exchanged our vows, laughed, danced, and celebrated late into the night. It was the happiest, most peaceful moment of my entire life. The fallout for my parents was swift and complete. To clear the lien off their luxury condo and avoid public criminal charges for identity fraud, my father was forced to drain his business reserve accounts to pay the full $28,000 in fees. When news of the legal filing hit the county record systems, my father's high society business partners realized he was involved in fraud and pulled their consulting contracts. My mother's country club peers quickly found out about the entire pathetic scheme, turning her into the primary subject of local gossip. Their pristine reputation was completely shattered. I officially cut off all financial and personal contact with Richard and Eleanor. I changed my phone number, blocked their email addresses, and revoked their access to my life. Julian and I used our untouched wedding savings to put a down payment on a stunning historic home near the water, where we are now building a life grounded in love, honesty, and true respect. My parents tried to destroy my future to save their pride. In the end, they paid for my peace, lost their reputation, and proved to the world that no amount of money can ever buy class.